My role, I have a role as Colonel of the Blues and Rolls in the Household Cavalry Regiment, as Gold Stick.
In a stunning royal standoff that's ignited tension behind palace walls, Princess Anne has reportedly issued her final ultimatum to Queen Camilla, demanding the return of the late Queen Elizabeth's priceless jewels. What began as a quiet disagreement over royal heirlooms has now escalated into a full-blown confrontation that's shaken the monarchy's fragile unity. Insiders reveal Anne's words were firm, emotional, and deeply personal. So, why is she so determined to reclaim her mother's treasures? Let's uncover the truth behind Anne's powerful ultimatum to Camilla. Princess Anne's silent storm. Anne, the Princess Royal, known across Britain for her fierce loyalty and her refusal to tolerate deceit, found herself at the center of whispers that refused to fade. What began as faint murmurs within the palace corridors soon grew into something far more unsettling. It started innocently enough, with a quiet review of the late Queen Elizabeth II's private collection, an administrative routine rarely discussed beyond the palace gates. A discreet team, handpicked for its precision and trustworthiness, was tasked with confirming the authenticity and condition of the royal jewels. It was a job steeped in order and ceremony. But this time, something was different. What should have been a calm verification process began to spiral. First came confusion, then concern, and eventually, fear. The records didn't match. Pieces listed as secured could not be found. One item in particular sent shockwaves through the room. A diamond flower brooch once gifted to Queen Elizabeth by Queen Victoria herself. Presented in the days before Elizabeth's own coronation, a symbol of continuity linking monarch to monarch, it was missing. Then came the realization that the Queen's sapphire and diamond necklace, worn on solemn Commonwealth occasions as a radiant emblem of unity and endurance, had also vanished. These were not mere ornaments. Each piece was a chapter in Britain's living history, a reflection of the monarchy's identity and endurance. Their disappearance wasn't just a loss of treasure, it was a wound to the nation's story. The absence of these heirlooms left behind an echo that could be felt in the quiet halls of Windsor, in the guarded expressions of royal aides, and in the air of secrecy that soon blanketed the palace. To the outside world, nothing was said, no official statements, no acknowledgements. The Royal Communications Office sealed every leak, forbidding even the faintest whisper from escaping to the press. Only a small circle of the most senior royals was informed, chosen not for their curiosity, but for their discretion. The objective was simple: to contain a scandal before it ignited. But Princess Anne, who had inherited her mother's unshakable sense of duty and reverence for history, was not one to remain silent. When the truth finally reached her, she did not react with fury or public outcry. She remained poised, her expression unreadable, her silence heavy with meaning. Yet beneath that stillness burned a restrained anger, calculated, deliberate, and resolute. Anne understood what few others did. These jewels were not merely possessions, they were sacred vessels of memory. They carried the story of her mother's 7-decade reign, the essence of royal continuity, and the trust of a nation. In private moments, Anne was haunted by recollections of her mother's final days, quiet conversations filled with reflection and faith. The late Queen had spoken with tenderness about each heirloom, reminding Anne that their worth lay not in their carats, but in what they represented: duty, legacy, and the binding thread of family across generations. She had once told Anne that the sapphire pendant would one day belong to Princess Charlotte, her great-granddaughter. The Victorian brooch, too, had been destined for Anne herself, a symbol connecting the royal women who had carried the crown's weight through centuries. And now, both were gone. How could heirlooms meant to unite generations vanish into secrecy, leaving behind whispers of betrayal, power, and a queen's final unfulfilled promise? Keep watching, the whisper that shattered the silence. Someone had disturbed what was once a sacred royal order. The calm precision that governed every aspect of the late Queen's household had been fractured, and by human hands, not chance. At first, the palace aides rushed to offer explanations that sounded polite, procedural, and thoroughly unconvincing. They blamed it on a clerical error, a minor slip that supposedly occurred during the complex transition of estates and duties after Queen Elizabeth's passing in 2022.
Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning monarch in Commonwealth history, has died at the age of 96.
But to Anne, that excuse rang hollow. The royal household had operated under one of the most rigorous inventory systems in the world. Every jewel, every heirloom, Every item of historical importance had been catalogued, tracked, and recorded under generations of tradition. These objects didn't simply vanish, they were moved. And movements, in this case, were intentional. As the quiet unease inside the palace thickened, one name began to surface again and again in hushed conversations and veiled remarks. Camilla, the queen consort. Her presence in the queen's private quarters and her new role in handling the royal jewels had not gone unnoticed. Aides who were once fiercely loyal to the late queen began to whisper of inconsistencies. Pieces seen under Camilla's care that no longer appeared in official records. Jewels worn briefly during private gatherings that were never logged in the royal archives. Each discrepancy was small enough to dismiss individually, yet together they painted an unsettling pattern. Princess Anne's patience began to tighten like a wire. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a cold, strategic determination. She knew she couldn't storm into Buckingham Palace demanding answers, nor could she expose such a matter to the public without igniting a national scandal. Instead, Anne chose the path of quiet resolve, the same calm but unyielding strength that had defined her entire life within the monarchy. She would uncover the truth, but on her own terms. Those close to her began to notice subtle changes, the careful tone in her private correspondence, the discreet questions she asked during family briefings, the deliberate silences when others spoke too confidently. Anne understood that her battle wasn't just about missing jewels, it was about something far deeper, the meaning of legacy, the weight of inheritance, and the unspoken trust between generations of royal women. Perhaps, Anne thought, Camilla believed her new title granted her authority over symbols of the crown. But Anne knew better. Legacy was never about what one inherited. It was about what one protected. These heirlooms carried more than gold and gems. They bore the memory of her mother's reign, the lineage of ancestors, and the quiet endurance of royal duty. And yet, even as Anne quietly gathered her strength, the first glimmer of truth came from somewhere entirely unexpected. A message arrived, not from within the palace walls, but from far beyond them. It was discreet, almost cautious, but carried the kind of weight that made even the most seasoned aides fall silent. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but laced with an urgency that pierced through the royal quiet like a blade through silk. Each word was chosen with surgical precision, each pause deliberate, as if the speaker knew the gravity of what they were about to reveal. Anne listened in stillness, her eyes fixed on the frost-coated window as the voice continued. It wasn't gossip, it wasn't speculation, it was testimony, firsthand and unfiltered. The caller claimed to have seen the vault themselves, to have handled the items Camilla had quietly transferred, and to know exactly when the security logs had been erased. Their tone carried no bitterness, only conviction. They said the operation had been masked as an inventory reclassification, routine, harmless, and perfectly timed to coincide with the Queen's passing. Anne didn't interrupt once. She simply took notes, every muscle taut with disbelief and restrained fury. When the call ended, the line returned to silence, but the air around her changed. The truth had slipped through the cracks of the palace's carefully guarded facade, and Anne now possessed something more powerful than proof. She had a witness, and with it, the beginning of an unraveling no one in the monarchy could control. What secret lay buried beneath Ray Mill House, so powerful, so forbidden, that even the crown dared not speak its name? Stay glued. The hidden vault of Ray Mill House. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II had left behind more than grief. It had left behind a legacy woven into every jewel, brooch, and pendant that carried her story. Before her death, she had spoken with quiet conviction about these pieces. The transfer of her heirlooms, she said, must be done with care and devotion, not as a formality, but as a sacred act of continuity. The sapphire pendant was to be passed to her great-granddaughter, Princess Charlotte, a future symbol of the monarchy's endurance. The Victorian diamond brooch, an heirloom once worn by Queen Victoria herself, was intended for Princess Anne, the daughter who had stood beside her through decades of duty and silence. But somewhere along the line, that sacred order was broken. Someone had disturbed what was meant to remain untouched. At first, the explanations offered by palace aides were polite, procedural, and ultimately hollow. They suggested there had been a clerical oversight amid the complex transition of the royal household after the Queen's death, but Anne was not convinced. The royal inventory system was one of the most tightly controlled in Britain, centuries old, audited with almost military precision. Such treasures did not simply disappear. They were moved, And as the quiet unease deepened, one name began to emerge from the fog: Camilla, now queen consort. Subtle inconsistencies surrounded the pieces under her care. Aides recalled seeing jewels appear at private gatherings that were never recorded. Others noticed that certain heirlooms had vanished from archives after being temporarily transferred to Camilla's possession. There were no official records, no clear explanations, only a lingering pattern of confusion. Anne's fury, at first concealed, began to crystallize into something colder, sharper. She could not confront Camilla publicly. Such an act would tear open the palace's fragile stability. So she moved quietly, relying on the patience and precision that had always defined her. Every question she asked, every silence she held, was part of a careful strategy. For Anne, this was not merely about jewels. It was about integrity, about the trust her mother had placed in her. Legacy, she realized, was not built from what one inherited. It was measured by what one protected. Perhaps Camilla believed her new title granted her command over the emblems of royal authority, but Anne knew that crowns do not define legacy. Actions do, and what had been taken represented more than ancestry and wealth. It spoke of betrayal, one Anne could not and would not ignore. Then, unexpectedly, the first real clue came from beyond palace walls. A voice from the past reached out, calm but trembling with urgency. The caller had once been part of Camilla's inner circle, serving as her personal assistant in the quieter years before the coronation. She spoke carefully, revealing what she described as a long-buried mistake that had haunted her for months. She wasn't calling for money or fame. She wanted the truth known. She claimed to have seen what few others ever could: a hidden vault tucked deep within Ray Mill House, Camilla's private retreat in Wiltshire. It wasn't part of the royal archives nor a government repository, but a secluded, constantly monitored chamber. And within it, she said, were items that glittered with unmistakable familiarity, pieces that once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II herself. Anne listened in frozen silence, every word falling into place like shards of a long-broken mirror. The picture that began to form was chillingly clear and impossible to ignore. So what if that hidden vault wasn't just a secret, but the key to uncovering a betrayal buried deep within royal walls? Stay tuned. The Vault of Silence. The call that changed everything began quietly, with a former aide who could no longer bear the weight of what she knew. She spoke with steady conviction, revealing details that sent a chill through Princess Anne's disciplined composure. Among the missing heirlooms, the aide listed pieces whose names carried deep royal resonance. The Queen's famous emerald and diamond choker, never logged in official royal records since the late Queen's death. The sapphire brooch that had once symbolized steadfast unity, and a pearl tiara with an illustrious lineage, unseen since a discreet diplomatic gala. Each piece had vanished into silence, with Queen Camilla's only public reassurance being that the jewels were under secure family safekeeping. To the aide, and to Anne, that phrasing was deeply troubling. The assistant's questions cut through the secrecy like a blade. Who had authorized such transfers? Where were the records proving the chain of custody? And why were treasures belonging to the crown being treated as private property? For Anne, the matter had now crossed beyond suspicion. It had become personal. She told no one, not even her closest family or advisors. Instead, she acted with the quiet urgency and precision that had long defined her. She reached out to two trusted officers from the Royal Protection Command, men bound by discretion and loyalty, assigning them a covert mission. Their task was to reevaluate the security at Ray Mill House, Camilla's secluded residence in Wiltshire. What they found, after weeks of cautious investigation, confirmed the aide's disturbing claims. There was a vault, hidden, tightly restricted, and strangely unaccounted for. Both digital and written access logs had been erased, leaving no official trace of who entered or when. But the evidence that the team gathered through discreet photography and detailed documentation was irrefutable. Inside that vault were dozens of items unmistakably belonging to Queen Elizabeth II. Each piece bore the wrong designation, relabeled under vague family categories instead of the Royal Collection Trust codes used for crown property. It was no clerical mistake. It was deliberate concealment. Anne pored over every photograph, each image a painful reminder of what had been lost. Not just jewels, but integrity, legacy, and the unbroken thread of her mother's reign. One image in particular made her pause. The emerald choker, glinting under artificial light. Stripped of its meaning and locked away, in that private vault. The necklace, she remembered, had been described by her mother as a lesson in restraint and heritage.
My mother was the queen for a very long time, and although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much.
A reminder that elegance was never about possession, but purpose. Now, it lay desecrated, reduced to a relic of power rather than principle. At that moment, Anne understood what this truly was. It was not about diamonds or decorum. It was about control of the narrative, an effort, subtle, deliberate, and dangerous, to reshape Queen Elizabeth's legacy through the symbolism of her jewels. If Camilla believed that wearing history could make her its keeper, she had underestimated the woman who had guarded the crown's honor through war, scandal, and silence. To Anne, this was not merely an act of theft. It was a violation of trust, of history, and of the sacred continuity that had bound the monarchy for generations. And now, for the first time, that continuity was under threat from within. But how did a single hidden letter, sealed in silence since the Queen's death, ignite a storm fierce enough to divide a dynasty? Keep watching. The letter that shook the palace. What began as whispers in hushed corridors soon evolved into one of the most emotionally charged moments in modern royal history. The suggestion to remove Princess Anne from future Order of the Garter ceremonies was not merely an administrative adjustment. It was a public humiliation cloaked in formality. This ceremony, one of the oldest and most sacred traditions of the monarchy, was deeply personal to Anne, whose life had been defined by duty rather than indulgence. To be excluded from it was to be cut off from the very heartbeat of royal service, a blow that struck at her identity, her reputation, and her mother's legacy. Behind palace doors, the news ignited quiet chaos. Advisors divided sharply. Some defended Anne's years of unwavering service. Others aligned themselves with Queen Camilla, whose growing influence made her nearly untouchable. Many whispered their doubts about her motives, but kept silent. Fear of losing royal favor outweighed any sense of loyalty. The result was an invisible fracture running through the royal household, poisoning even the most routine gatherings and official visits. Then came a discreet note, sealed with the royal insignia. It was from Prince William. The heir had always held deep respect for his aunt, and his message was short but heavy with warning. Tread carefully. Your conflict with Camilla has widened. It was not a call for surrender. It was a recognition that the stakes had risen far beyond personal pride. That evening, in her private study, Anne sat alone beneath the soft glow of a desk lamp, rereading the draft decree that proposed her exclusion. She did not weep. The words, cold and bureaucratic, only strengthened her resolve. This was no longer about jewelry or ceremony. It was about integrity. The monarchy, in her eyes, had always been built on service.
It is the monarch that is the key to this, and the constitution that underpins the monarchy.
Not self-interest, but destiny, as ever, had a way of revealing hidden truths. In the royal archives, sealed under the authority of the Lord Chamberlain's office, lay an envelope untouched since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. It bore only the late Queen's personal cipher. Most believed it contained a farewell message, a final blessing perhaps. When Anne finally obtained access, what she discovered changed everything. Inside was a handwritten letter, intimate, steady, and unmistakably her mother's. Elizabeth's words were deliberate, filled with the quiet authority that had defined her reign. She wrote not of titles or succession, but of values. The monarchy, she said, was not a machine but a living story of sacrifice, continuity, and care. Every jewel in the royal collection, she reminded, carried history, not ownership. There is history in every stone, she wrote. History cannot be claimed, it must be carried. The letter went on to outline her personal wishes. The famed sapphire necklace, long rumored to be among the most valuable of her treasures, was to belong one day to Princess Charlotte, a symbol, the Queen wrote, of the bridge between queens past and queens yet to come. When Elizabeth turned her pen to Camilla, her tone softened, but carried unease. She feared that the new queen might mistake heritage for power. And then came the final declaration, the most defining of all. Anne, she wrote, understands more than anyone what legacy costs. No lawyer's signature followed, no seal of state, only a mother's words, and they were enough. When Anne placed that letter on the mahogany table during the next royal council meeting, the air shifted. No one spoke. It was as if Elizabeth herself had risen to defend the very heart of her legacy. And in that silence, alliances realigned. Doubts faded. Princess Anne, who had never craved a crown, but had carried its weight her entire life, finally stood taller than ever. But as the truth began to ripple beyond the palace walls, the fragile balance shattered. Leaks hit the press, whispers of missing heirlooms, of Camilla's secret vault, of Anne's quiet fury. Within hours, the story was everywhere, and for the first time in decades, the House of Windsor was at war, not with the world, but with itself. So what do you think? Did Queen Elizabeth's final letter expose a silent power struggle that still haunts the palace today? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.